بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Assalamu alaikum. It is Monday, the 25th of October, 2021. And in our English series of broadcasts, these are called Reflections on the Holy Quran. And this is broadcast number 269 in that series. And today we will start with verse 94 of the second chapter of the Holy Quran, Al-Baqarah, and this is the first broadcast about that word, about that verse. So we'll go through the meanings of its words to see what significance we can derive from that. Just to remind you that these broadcasts are brought to you by the Lahore Ahmadiyya community, which was created by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Sahib. And his teaching was that although some people say that at least one more prophet will come after the Holy Prophet Muhammad, the Holy Quran teaches us that the Holy Prophet was Khatamun Nabiyyin. And the Holy Prophet explained that by saying, La Nabi Abadi, there is no prophet after me. So now no prophet will come, whether an old prophet or a new one. And the Holy Prophet explained in a hadith that when people in their actions or in their beliefs go astray, then God will send. Remember these words. People appoint reformers and mujaddids, but the Holy Prophet said, God will raise a mujaddid. Now, this will inevitably give rise to differences of opinion, because the reformer will try and reform and people will resist that, some of them. And we very quickly degenerate into calling each other heretics and kafirs and so on. But Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad pointed out that the Holy Prophet Muhammad had said that if one reciter of the kalima says to another reciter of the kalima that you are not a Muslim, then it is the person saying it who's closer to heresy. So we should avoid calling each other kafirs and heretics and so on. And Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad also taught that some people say that some prophetic revelation has been missed out from the Holy Quran, such as Ayah Rajam and Surah Walayat and so on. But he said that God has said that he will guard the revelation of the Holy Quran. So if Allah is guarding it, then nothing can be missing from it. Similarly, most people say that some verses of the Holy Quran are abrogated. Even Hazrat Shah Waliullah Rahmatullah Alayh, a man as great as him, he said that my research leads me to believe that 7 verses of the Holy Quran are abrogated. But we say, as Mr. Ghulam Ahmad said, no verse of the Holy Quran was, is, or ever shall be abrogated. And he stressed that jihad is a duty of every Muslim, but jihad as defined by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, who, when returning from fighting, said that Muslims were returning from the minor jihad to the major jihad, and then explained that the major jihad is jihad bin nafs. Jihad bin nafs meaning a jihad against your own self, against your inner self, your greed and enmity and envy and thousands of other things that we have with which we seek this world. As I said, we are starting on a discussion of verse 94 of Al-Baqarah. So let us turn to that. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل إن كانت لكم الدار الآخرة عند الله خالصة من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين. Say, if the abode of the hereafter with Allah is specially for you to the exclusion of the people, then invoke death if you are truthful. So today we are going to look at the word kul, with which the verse starts. In fact, we've discussed this many times over the previous weeks. But as I want to make these broadcasts independent, so I don't have to say, go and listen to or look at a broadcast that I did 2 weeks ago. So we'll have a brief look at that, and then kanat, and then dar. So let us see. Let us go to the my notes and see what they tell us and what they teach us. The first word, as we said, is qul. It consists of 2 letters, qaf and lam, but interestingly, its root, the triliteral root, is actually 3 letters, qaf, wa, lam. And it occurs in the Holy Quran 1722 times in 6 different forms. In other words, expressions with 6 different meanings are made from these 3 letters. 1618 times it's qala, and 92 times as qawl, and then you've got smaller occurrences, 5 times as qa'il, and 4 times as qil, and twice as takawwala, and once as aqawil. And this is, as we have seen, is say, said, etc. For example, the Holy Quran says in chapter 2, verse 14, وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. So there's the word qalu occurring there. And then in verse 26 of Al-Baqarah, we have وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَيَقُولُونَ. Again, a derivation of these three letters. And then, of course, in verse 30 of this chapter, that's chapter 2 Al-Baqarah, وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَائِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً, and so on. So this Kaf wa lam means anything that is expressed with the tongue where a movement is involved. It may be one letter, it may be one word, it may be one sentence, whatever it may be. But interestingly, it also applies to something that you haven't expressed, but you have thought about or you're thinking about. Your belief, your opinion, it applies to all of them. But then, as a metaphor, it has many meanings. To overcome, to hit, to beat, to die, to find contentment and pleasure. So all of these. And so from that you can see, as I always say, that it's very important that you understand the context in which a particular word is used. It's not really that hard. If you just sort of, look at the Holy Quran without trying to find and meanings into it and trying to find special meanings in it and so on. Here's an example of the use of this word. Chapter 18, verse 86. قُلْنَا يَا الْقَرْنَيْنِ إِمَّا أَن تُعَذِّبْ. And we said to Zulkarnain. We obviously means God. Now, this is God in the Holy Quran, God saying that I spoke to Zulkarnain. There's a dispute about or discussion about who he was, but that needn't concern us. But we know that Zulkarnain was not a prophet. And here God is saying, I spoke to him. He clearly says, I said to him. Now, because as an Ummah, Muslims have made up this belief that God does not speak to non-prophets. They then write pages and pages and pages and pages on what? On how God spoke to Zulkarnain. Well, it must have been something he put in his heart, or because God doesn't speak to non-prophets, and so on. So, where does God say, I don't speak to non-prophets? Here he is clearly saying, I speak to Zulkarnain. In another place, God tells us that he even sends angels to non-prophets. And when the angel said to Mary, you'll have a son. And Mary said, how can that be? Now there, God is speaking to Mary, and he sent an angel. So why don't we just stick to the words of the Holy Quran? Angel went to Mary, so angels can go to non-prophets. Or here, Kulna Yazal Karnain. We said to Zulkarnain. It's disputes and dissension and things arise when we try and then, put meanings into simple words of the Holy Quran. Just translate it as it is. We said to Zulkarnain, God spoke to a non-prophet. But because we make up beliefs and then we try and justify them from the Holy Quran, then we get into these fancy arguments and grammatical this and grammatical that and so on. Take it as it is. I mean, here God also says, and I've mentioned this many times, Kulna ya naru. Now let's compare the two. Kulna ya Zulkarnain. We said. And generally, those outside the Jamaat, the brothers, they say, well, God put something in his heart, and, God doesn't directly command non-prophets and all this kind of thing. Here it says, Orna Yanaru. We commanded, we said, O fire, cool down. Okay, God put something in Zulkarnain's heart. So how did he tell the fire to cool down? How did he do that? You see, if you just take the simple view that God speaking to things means God commanding the universe, then it's easy. He spoke to Zulkarnain, he spoke to Mary, he spoke to the fire, and so on. But that is if you just take the words of the Holy Quran and don't try and stuff meanings into them based on your preconceived ideas. And that is a great disservice that is done to Islam, because it has diverted Muslim energy into all kinds of debates that really are not very useful, and all they do is lead to dispute and dissension and so on. The next word we are going to look at is Kaanat. And we looked at it. Its triliteral root is Kaf Wa Noon. And we looked at Kuntum 5 days ago, and which has the same root. And this occurred in the Holy Quran. Where are we? 1390 times in 3 forms. So 1358 times Kana, and 27 times as Makan, and 5 times as makanat. And this is the equivalent of the English word in the English to be. So is, was, you are, he is, and so on. So you were, it serves that purpose. For example, in verse 10, وَلَهُمْ أَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ بِمَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. They used to. Were they were, you are, he is, and all of these, same root is used. And the important thing about that, this word is to remember that it is applied to God. So when it's applied to God, it means that it encompasses the whole of time. وَكَانَ اللَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمًا, chapter 33, verse 40. God knows everything. And that is, he has always known everything. From before creation. When there was no creation, there was only God. To now, to the future that hasn't happened. He knows what's going to happen. So his knowledge encompasses everything. So that has to be remembered. Otherwise, we'll go astray. Another place, chapter 33, verse 51. Kana Allahu aliman hakima. Allah is Alim and Hakim. He always was, he always will be. It's not that at one time he wasn't, and then he became Alim and Hakim, or at one time he was, and now he's lost that ability, like human beings, when they get old, the memory begins to fade and all that kind of thing. It's not that. So, and again, وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرًا, chapter 48, verse 21. He has power over everything. And that means he has always had, and he will always have power over everything. Not that yesterday he did and today he doesn't, and so on. And the last word we're going to have a look at is Ad-Daru. And its triliteral root is Dal Va Ra. Dal Va Ra. And it occurs in the Holy Quran 55 times in 6 derived forms. So you have 48 times you have Dar. And 3 times you have Daira. And the others are ones, Taduru and Tudiru, Dar we've done, and Dawair and Dayar. So these are sort of ones, occur ones in the Holy Quran. Let me just move this window. So it, if you look at it, then we find a literal meaning you can take to be that something starts at a point, moves, and then gets back to the same point again. And so it means a circle, because that encompasses something. And that can be your, it can also apply to your house. Ad-daru, jama, plural is they are, home, house. And that is because, it's encompassed, it's enclosed by something. Or people go around it and get back to the same point. If you have a house, like our house, you're standing at the front door, and if you go around it, you get back to the same position. And as I said, its basic meaning is taken to be, for one thing, that encompasses the whole of something else. For example, Lahum Darus Salami Inda Rabbihim, chapter 6, verse 127. And in return for their deeds, they will go to Darus Salam, the house of peace. And here it means heavens, Jannah. And we have Darul Bawari, chapter 14, verse 28. The pit or hell. So, and in other places in the Holy Quran, chapter 2, verse 243, Alam tara ila allazina kharaju min diyarihim. Haven't you seen the people who rushed out of their homes? So this is literally the house where people live. They rushed out. But then in chapter 22, verse 246, we have Waqad ukhrijna min diyarina. And when we were expelled from our home. But here home means our country, our land, where we lived. So it can apply to a house, it can apply to a street, it can apply to an area, to a city. And here the Holy Quran applies it to a country, to a land where people lived. But it's also applied to in the sense of things sort of turn and come back to the same point. Like in chapter 5, verse 52, Naksha an tusibana da'irat. We are afraid that the time will turn. And here, time will turn. What does it mean? It means that, good times become bad and bad times become good and so on. But here, it's because they're afraid. They're afraid that good times will leave them and bad times will come. Again, the Holy Quran tells us what its plural is. I think I've mentioned the plural, dawa'ir. And here it's used in chapter 9, verse 98 to indicate trials and tribulations and difficulties and so on. وَيَتَرَبَّصُ بِكُمُ الدَّوَائِرَ عَلَيْهِمْ دَائِرَةُ السَّوْءِ. So they will be encircled by difficulties, trials, tribulations, destruction in the same way that a person is in a circle. He's been encircled and he can't find a way out of it. So they will be encircled. And Adabvaru was also the name of an idol that was worshipped. And why did it have that name? Because you should have been able to guess it. People went round it in a circle. They circumambulated round it. So it was given that name. I can see that the time of the broadcast is over, so I take my leave of you with the prayer that whoever you are, wherever you may be, regardless of your religion, sect, caste, creed, language, color, may Allah protect the whole of humanity and keep it safe. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, goodbye.